We have a program here that has come on national TV here in America that we felt like it was essential in documenting it and telling people about the uncertainty times that we live in pertaining to the risation of Satan, as the Bible predicts that will occur in the last days. You know, back whenever I was growing up in school, if there was a major conflict in two people's lives that was a disagreement, you know, sometimes personalities just clash, but then again, sometimes you bring it upon yourselves, pertaining to being entrapped into a situation that you know is going to be a bad situation by you becoming entrapped into that situation, but you allow for yourself to get into that situation anyways. Back whenever I was growing up, ordinarily the way that two brutes wanted to straighten out their differences was they took it in behind the school somewhere off the playgrounds and they duked it out. Occasionally, very few occasions, somebody would bring a pocket knife to school. We're talking about during a time that people had a lot of trust in people. We're talking about during a time that if you was a young lad and you wanted to go squirrel hunting or rabbit hunting or even deer hunting late in the afternoon after school was out, it was considered a normal procedure for somebody to drive up onto the school in a pickup truck with either a shotgun or a high-powered rifle or a bow and arrow openly showing itself while the student was in school, going to school. Today, if you was to go up onto a school property displaying guns like that, you would probably be greeted immediately by the authorities and possibly even SWAT. We are running into one various situation after another pertaining to the prophecies coming true that it talks about. Satan will rise up in great wrath. And this is only one program to validate those things that the Bible has already forecasted that is going to take place in the last days. Why people has it in their hearts that they want to be the bad guy and they want to be cruel to society in some sort of way has to be originated by the demonic forces that are taking over that person's heart, that person's mind, that person's emotions, to the point that they want to inflict bodily harm upon the people. They want to inflict bodily harm upon the people because they're trying to use brute force in getting their way. You know, it's one thing if you have a weapon or if you have to use brute force because of somebody else that's using brute force against you. It's kind of like what the president of the NRA said a few years ago, that the only way for a good person to defeat a bad person with a gun is to have a gun. And in lots of perspectives, that is correct. You meet force of the same aggression that you're being greeted with. That's the reason why that the Windmill Ministries message is so essential of getting out and opening up people's eyes in not only America but throughout the world, that we are living in horrendous, horrible, extremely horrible times. And that's the reason why that we put out as many programs as we put out in the safety and the well interest of the betterment of the good for the will of the people. because we don't want to see this type of hardship. We don't want to see this type of bloodshed. We don't want to see these things escalating and growing unproportionately out of control more and more and more. And it really breaks the Heavenly Father's heart to see how that this aggression has really, really gotten out of hand, to the point that now you're basically unsecure and unsafe no matter who you are, no matter where you are, even in your own home. Because at any given moment, some cruel, deranged, possessed individual could come in on top of you, and the next thing you know, you're having to deal with a situation that basically was your worst nightmare, and now it's basically coming true. What we're fixing to see is another ingenious ideal that humanity has come up with towards trying to take out, and I was wanting to say opponent, but it really goes beyond any type of competition. Whenever you're wanting to kill somebody, you're actually taking upon yourself to bring destruction into a person's life that, according to the Bible, is against God's will. Thou shalt not kill was put there for a reason. Because if God did not demonstrate his desires towards making commandments, this world would have done already fallen apart so badly that God would have had to have intervened and destroyed it once more again, the same way that he done during other cultures and other generations. And if it ever reaches that pivotal point again, to where it's basically a lost cause, that's whenever God will throw the towel in, Gabriel will blow the trumpet, the dead in Christ shall rise, and those who are alive and remain shall be caught up to be with the Lord Jesus Christ in his heavenly kingdom, with God and his kingdom. And that's whenever this planet will be thrown into a misery such as it has never, ever, ever been thrown off into before. And what I'm talking about here is the Great Tribulation. Something that our wildest, adventurous imaginations cannot even begin to conceive in just exactly how bad that this is going to be. What you're fixing to see is another invention by humanity that is trying to divert or get around the law in trying to make self-destructing inventions to want to bring that much more harm and hurt into humanity. What you're fixing to see is another fulfillment of the prophecy that in the last days Satan will rise up. He's not just going to rise up in one or two areas like perversion, sexual perversion, immoral sexual perversion that we see today all over the planet in regards towards immoral sexual activity. But in other areas, probably, if the truth be known, thousands of different areas that Satan is rising up towards disobedient to parents, lovers of their own flesh, horrendous killings, crime going up, nations and countries not getting along, seeing the contamination of this pandemic that has rattled the planet pertaining to the diseases, seeing all the abortions, killing all the innocent children, having a country that is out of control towards being $30 trillion in debt. Our jail systems is strained to no end, to the point that there is no more room to put people other than to put them on top of each other. seeing where we have failed in other issues, regardless whether it was Desert Storm, Desert Shield, or the Afghanistan war, and now staring down the barrel of another possibility of another disturbance over in Russia and the Ukraine area. So it's pretty obvious that Satan is rising up in great wrath in these last days, trying to bring that much more infliction, pain, harm, agony, and distress uponto the Homo sapiens, uponto the planet. What you're fixing to see here, once more, is another invention that this study today is bringing to the awareness of not only the American people, but the world, in regards towards one of the other obstacles that law enforcement has to adhere and has to try to defeat, because the wicked, the demonic, the cruel, the dark-hearted is trying every way that it can towards bringing that much more harm and destruction to humanity. What we're talking about here is a ghost gun. A ghost gun that can be manipulated into a device that can be just as lethal as any other gun out there, especially at close range, but cannot be seen by the inventions of our experts whenever it comes to examining various things that's hidden, let's say, in people's briefcases as they're traveling or going through various security points, that these things cannot be identified as being there because they have crafted such of a intentional deception in our examination x-rays cannot detect these particular products or items that now are being massively made, not just in America, but throughout the world. You know, if we ain't got one hurdle to have to go through pertaining to the drug culture, we've got another problem with the gun culture. We got other problems with natural catastrophe cultures that's now increasing. Not the act of God, but the act of natural catastrophes that can be fumigated through Satan, the strongholds of Satan coming down in great wrath, bringing that much more harm and hurt to the Homo sapiens here upon to the planet. We're dealing with so many different levels of concern pertaining to safety that it's almost mind-blowing, and it probably would be to some people unless they have been grafted into understanding these variations of destruction that at any given moment can bring to humanity down here up onto the planet. It's not just nuclear bombs that we're concerned about. It's not just natural catastrophes that we're concerned about. It's not just various other big things that we're concerned about. We're also concerned about the smaller things. You know, whenever, and I get this confused quite often, whenever Cain killed Abe, his brother, or Abe killed Cain, or whichever one it was that killed each other, killed one another, killed one of the other brothers, over greed, selfishness, intimidation, pride, whatever category that you want to put it in, that basically opened up a brand new movement in society causing people to want to take other people's lives, to bring that type of destruction into humanity. That opened up a brand new movement. And to this day, we know that you can take somebody's life and not have an actual firearm. You can use a club, a stick, a knife, a bow and arrow, a BB gun, a slingshot, or you can just take your own fist and keep battering and battering a person's life physically or even psychologically, and either damage or destroy that human being. These are all elements, characteristics that come against God's holy divine kingdom pertaining to the instructions that he has given humanity towards not doing. Towards not doing. And anytime we see people going into schools, people going into churches, people going into theaters, people going into nightclubs, people knocking out windows in casino clubs and killing innocent people, it just should awaken humanity in understanding and knowing that we are truly here where the predictions out of the Bible has already done predicted of where we're going to be thousands of years ago, and now we're actually in that moment. We're actually at that threshold to where we're seeing this. So whenever you watch this, understand that the meanness of humanity, the cruelty, the insanity part of humanity has escalated and escalated and escalated to the point of where we are today, which is only the fulfillment of biblical Bible prophecy. Please listen.
Today, this morning, an alarming new trend that has law enforcement and government officials raising a red flag.
Yeah, police departments from coast to coast are warning that homemade firearms, known as ghost guns, are becoming more and more common on the streets. And a new NBC News investigation discovered instructions for making them can easily be found online.
NBC's Aaron McLaughlin joins us with more. Aaron, good morning.
Guys, good morning. Across the country, crime is on the rise, and authorities say increasingly criminals have a new tool to help them break the law, so-called ghost guns or untraceable firearms. Police say one was used by a teenager in a high school shooting that left another student critically injured. The shooter was just 17 years old. This morning, a 17-year-old student facing second-degree murder is expected in court after this terrifying scene unfolded at a Maryland high school Friday.
There's kids stuck in classrooms, closets,
The high school junior allegedly shot a 15-year-old sophomore who was injured but is expected to survive, say authorities. Police have charged the shooter as an adult and say the weapon he used was a ghost gun, a kind of build-it-yourself firearm that has no serial number and is nearly impossible to trace. Authorities say ghost guns are quickly becoming the criminal's weapon of choice, and instructions to make them live online. An NBC News investigation found 3 years after YouTube banned ghost gun tutorials, dozens of videos with step-by-step directions for building the weapons were still on the site. YouTube says its guidelines prohibit such content and has since taken down the posts we flagged for violating its firearms policy.
These guns can shoot just like any other gun, because that's what it is, but it's not serialized.
Police say ghost gun kits are readily available on mainstream platforms, and a legal loophole allows anyone to buy one without a background check, including convicted felons, even children. That's because the kits only contain partially completed gun parts. It's not until the kit begins to be assembled that it's considered a firearm and possibly illegal.
And you can see the holes where the specific drill locations are. And so when we come into a house and we see 3 or 4 of these sitting down in the kitchen, we know what's going on. They're building ghost guns.
Nationwide, the number of seized ghost guns increased almost 5 times between 2016 and 2020. Last year in San Diego, the number has gone up more than tenfold since 2019. Police here are so alarmed, they've established one of the first ghost gun units in the country. We sat down with 2 of the unit's undercover agents. Who is attracted to these kinds of guns?
I mean, if you think about it, it's criminals that are attracted to it, right? It's people that don't want you to know that they have these guns. I mean, that's the big thing. That's the big draw.
And how difficult is it to make one of these guns?
I mean, if you can do IKEA furniture, you can do this.
It's about ease of access to these firearms.
In 2019, Brian Mulberger's 14-year-old daughter Gracie was killed by a ghost gun during a school shooting outside of Los Angeles. Brian says he was able to find and purchase a ghost gun kit with his cell phone in minutes, using Gracie's name.
It was really disheartening when a box showed up in my mailbox and to my front door with my daughter's name on it.
Do you feel you're making progress?
Yeah, I do. I mean, just if you think about it, every gun that you get off the street, there's a possible victim behind that gun.
Even so, the detectives say technology is outpacing the law.
The internet is so much bigger now than it was even 5-6 years ago. And what you can get online and how it teaches you how to build these things.
10 states, including California and New York, have enacted laws to at least partially address ghost guns. The Justice Department has proposed a new federal rule that would regulate the sale of homemade gun kits like all other firearms, requiring buyers to pass background checks and force manufacturers to add serial numbers to parts. The rule is still pending. Craig?
All right, an eye-opening report for us this morning. Aaron, thank you.
All right, Mr. Rooker's back. You got enough?
Once more, the new invention or ideal towards wanting to bring this type of destruction or harm to people's lives towards taking somebody's life is not a new invention. That's not a new invention. That goes all the way back to the Bible days, whenever one brother decided to take the other brother's life because one brother was jealous of the other brother because God blessed that brother in his sacrifice more so than the other brother, if you know anything at all about the Bible. So the concept of wanting to bring harm and hurt to somebody's life was manufactured, was brought into an existence by an evil demonic being called Satan, Lucifer. That's what puts the seed into somebody's heart, into somebody's mind, towards wanting to bring this type of destruction in individuals' lives, especially if they can be clever about it, towards making a device that cannot be identified by our standard examination devices that we have to be able to x-ray into certain situations and certain areas that we can identify if you got this type of product or not. So by me saying that, I say this: the crime in New York that has just recently exploded, the crime in Chicago that has now reached all-time levels of high, the crime throughout the country is going up. It's almost as if the quality of life has diminished to the point that now a human being's life isn't no more valuable than the life of a run-over, roadkill raccoon or a possum on the road. And that's sad, because all life is precious. All lives matter, regardless whether who they are or where they're from. All life matters, including the raccoon that got run over on the road. It's reached a very, very critical moment in history in the year 2022 by looking at all this stuff that is now just, it's mind-blowing. You know, just like the methanol or whatever they call it that they make meth out of. It's just mind-blowing that people would actually deliberately, consciously throw themselves off into that area knowing what the consequences are going to be eventually. Knowing what the consequences are going to be eventually. And it's reached a level that whenever it comes to our laws here in America, I don't know how it is everywhere else. I can only vouch for what's going on here. It's reached a point that our laws in America has basically become squandered They become squashed. They don't hold no value whenever it comes to you being penalized or punished for committing such of a crime like this. So are we at a critical stage of our lives in 2022 towards seeing biblical Bible prophecy unfolding? Absolutely. 100%. And if it's not coming in one form, it's coming in another form. If it's not coming in one fashion, it's coming in another fashion. If it's not coming from the sky, it's coming from the ground. If it's not coming from the human sources, it's coming from the demonic sources. So either way you go, we're living in perilous times, just as the Bible talks about. And if we don't get a hold of this, this is the part, this is my part, where God has called me into. If we don't get a hold of this in a substantiating way, that's when God will intervene. And that's when God will bring so much misery upon the humanity, such as they have never, ever experienced before the beginning of time. That's what we're up against. That's exactly where we are as a society, regardless whether you live here in America or you live in some other country. Whenever it comes to all the hatred escalating, all the anti-Semitism against God and against godly people, this is where we are. And it's a very, very pinnacle point in history, that if we do not, because we're not going to be able to stand still. We're either going to go to the right or the left. And I'm just going to use this as an analogy. The right being the right way to go, the left being the wrong way to go. Okay? We're at a very, very pivotal point in history, to where if we do not move upon to all these troubles that is befallen upon to society, that's whenever God will move. And whenever he moves, I guarantee you there's not going to be no questions whatsoever in understanding who and what it was whenever he makes a move. Please listen to this one more time.
So the detectives say technology is outpacing the law.
The internet is so much bigger now than it was even 5-6 years ago. And what you can get online and how it teaches you how to build these things.
10 states, including California and New York, have enacted laws to at least partially address ghost guns. The Justice Department has proposed a new federal rule that would regulate the sale of homemade gun kits like all other firearms, requiring buyers to pass background checks and force manufacturers to add serial numbers to parts. The rule is still pending. Craig?
All right, an eye-opening.
There you go. There you go, right there. The rule is still pending. Why would the rule still be pending? Is it because various law enforcement agencies throughout this country pertaining to the people that makes the laws, is it because they're actually wanting these things to escalate and get worser and worser? I mean, sometimes I question my own officials in my own country of whether or not they're actually working for the good of the benefit of the betterment of the will of the people. Sometimes I wonder if they're actually not in behind wanting to see stuff escalate and get worse and worse and worse. And I'm not saying all, I'm just saying some that has this type of intentions, because whenever you see these agencies that's supposed to have already moved on these laws that hasn't, you have to start asking yourself the question, well, why haven't they moved? What's motivating them towards them not moving, towards making sure that these certain parts has serial numbers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, in trying to stifle or put out or eradicate this type of danger? You know, it's one thing for somebody to have a regular gun, a regular firearm, but at least that firearm is detectable in and on certain occasions, whenever you have to be going through some sort of a x-ray machine, let's say you're going into a courthouse or you're going into another area that's very, very prohibited against guns, and now you've got these guns that can basically go into courthouses and basically assassinate a judge or assassinate a sheriff or assassinate whoever inside the courthouse, because the weapon was not detected as it being a weapon. A matter of fact, usually it's not even detected at all in a lot of cases. I realize they pat people down. I realize that they take that little twine and they go over and make sure that you don't have no metal items that's going to alarm the examining procedures. But what if you had something like this? You could be actually in a courtroom in a trial, and if you were smart enough, and don't tell me how that it could be how that it could happen. Let's say a person, I'm just going to use just one example. Let's say a person had special shoes made, and they was big-footed. They was like 11 or 12 shoes, and these shoes had a high sole to them. We're talking about a sole maybe a inch, maybe an inch and a quarter thick, that made the appearance look like, well, this is just a normal pair of shoes that's got high soles. Maybe this person wanted to feel more attractive by being taller, and this was the way that they could achieve that, by buying these pair of shoes that's got these soles that's about an inch and a quarter to an inch and a half thicker or wider than most shoes. Well, if a person was talented enough, they could cut into that sole and literally make a gun, kind of like a Saturday Night Special, and embed it into the bottom of their sole of their shoe, and have a little door to where all they had to flip was some kind of little flipper on it, kind of like a James Bond deal. And the next thing you know, they could walk into a courtroom with a loaded weapon in their shoe that would not have been detected, and all they would have to do at the right time is take their foot, put it on their knee, open up their little door, pull out their gun, and then assassinate whoever that they wanted to assassinate. Now, that's just one example that I can think of off the top of my head towards what a person could do that comes off the street in open court that could do something like this, because it was basically an undetectable item that cannot be detected with and by our examination x-ray machines. We are at the point that almost any and everything can occur, to the exchange that whenever I wake up every morning and I look at the news, I ask myself, what's going to top the last major event that just happened yesterday that topped the event the day before? And whenever you have a society that is engaging in expecting these types of horror, you're going to have a society that is in horror because of this type of event. Please, anybody that gets a hold of this pertaining to the ghost gun analogy that I just got through explaining, please, anybody that gets a hold of this material, if there's any way possible that you can help to reach out, speak out to various law enforcement agencies to change the laws to where these parts will have serial numbers on them. That way, at least if somebody has committed the crime and they find the gun, maybe they can put two and two together towards identifying who it was that actually done the murder. If not, the murder is going to wind up being scot-free, and you won't never find the murder because you won't have nothing to attach the serial numbers to. I'm going to end by saying this. They found a corpse floating down the river. I don't know what river. Don't know if it was a year ago or 10 years ago, but I'm just telling you a story that I heard. Seems like it was within the past 3 or 4 years, to where they had found some woman body floating down a canal or floating down a river, and there was absolutely no way to identify this person. No way at all. They got to examining her body and found out that she had had a breast enhancement. And the silicone that they put into her chest towards enhancing her breast had serial numbers on it. They traced not only where the silicone operation took place towards enhancing her breast, but they found out who the woman was, and then they kept on until they figured out what happened to her, when it happened to her, and who it was that engaged in this body. So yes, whenever it comes to serial numbers, whenever it comes to identifying different parts on these ghost guns, it is essential. I mean essential. If you're going to identify these events towards possibly being able to put all the dots together in being able to bring some sort of a restitution or closure of justice to this human being's life that has been basically snapped out or taken out from amongst the living, that is now in the category of the dead. We have to be smarter. Not working harder, but smarter if we're going to beat these villains that's out there committing these type of crimes that does not have no value at all to human life. A matter of fact, some of them out there actually values a cat or a dog more so than a human. They hate humans. They're human killers. They despise humans. They've turned against humans. They don't want no part of humans, even though they themselves are human, okay? They're gutless. They're spineless. They don't want to take their own lives, but they would love it if somebody pushed enough buttons to the point that somebody done it for them. These people are evil. They're evilly demented. They're deranged. They're suicidal. And they're bringing that much more harm and destruction into good people's lives. Because what if it was your child? What if it was your child that got shot? And they found this plastic ghost gun. But there was absolutely no identification on this ghost gun in being able to figure out where the parts come from, when the parts was made, who made the parts, etc., etc., etc. And I'm not saying that it's a foolproof deal towards putting serial numbers on these parts, because it's a very difficult task in chasing down all the loopholes and going through all the problems and putting the dots together and identifying or solving a case. I'm not saying that it's foolproof, but what I am saying is this: it's more foolproof if they can have serial numbers on these ghost gun parts. That way, at least there'll be a chance that you can justify that human being's life that was snatched out of the earth toward being able to identify who the perpetrator was that actually done it. Please, whoever gets a hold of this, try to make a telephone call, try to make a text message, try to make an email message to your representatives and tell them that this needs to be passed and should have already been passed immediately if we're going to have any type of progress in solving some of these crazy events that goes on today that is not, I'm going to repeat, that is not slowing down, but are intensifying. Just like the crime surge is happening up in New York City right now. Just like the crime surge is happening throughout the countryside, okay? These crime surges are going in the opposite direction of peace and utopia. And this is what that I continue to keep saying again and again and again. And I'm going to say it again. This and these are the things that we know without a shadow of a doubt that the baby boomer society helped to bring in to the existence of where we are today, because they did not properly do the right thing during the time that they should have done the right thing, going back into the Ronald Reagan's administration. They have jeopardized the safety and the well-being of our lives. To this day, these same people, beginning with the Reagan administration, the Bushes, other high-ranking officials, has not been accountable for what that they have brought up into our lives. They're still trying to blame the Christians. They're still trying to blame everything on God. They're still trying to blame everything on everybody else other than blaming themselves. Thank you for listening. Good luck to all of us. As we end our program, we want to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts for listening, taking a part in some of the things that we're putting out there to the general public that hopefully will better society and not worsen it. Good luck to America, good luck to America's endeavors, and good luck to us all. Shalom.